First of all, I'd like to wish everyone good morning. And then we will recite the Vajradhara lineage prayer. And when we recite the Vajradhara lineage prayer, if you have strong faith and devotion in all of the Llamas of the Kagyu lineage, from Vajradhara all the way down to your root Lama, then you'll be able to receive the blessings. And if you receive the blessings, then you will be able to take your practice to its ultimate end. And if you will have fewer obstacles, you will be able to practice well. So please supplicate well. So yesterday we discussed the instructions that break open the eggshell of ignorance. Now, at the beginning of the instructions, it says, without having to study, reflect, and train extensively, but by maintaining the mind essence through the tradition of oral instructions. At the very beginning it says this. And so it seems to be saying that we don't really need to study and contemplate. But there's a reason why this is said. And the reason that this is said is that the time and place where Mipham Rinpoche gave these was in the lands in the valleys of Tibet. And the people he was teaching these to were nomads. And so many of the male and female householders had no chance to study. They were uneducated. They spent all their times doing their worldly work. They were working in the fields. They were doing the various nomadic activities of herding and so forth, and they had never had any chance to study at all. And so there were quite a few people at that time who were entirely illiterate and unable to study. But so this is saying that there actually is a way that these people could practice the Dharma. Even though there were a lot of them who were illiterate, many of them wanted to practice the Dharma to benefit themselves in this life and in future lives in order to be able to attain the ultimate states of liberation and omniscience. And so here Mipham was presenting them an easy way to practice so that they can do the practice of maintaining or sustaining the experience of resting in the nature of mind. And if they do this, if they follow these, then these simple, uncomplicated practices, then they also are able to, there are many of them who did come to the states of Vidyadhara. Now, in America, here, when the Dharma has spread here, the situation's a little bit different. And the reason it's different is that almost all of us, from the time we were young, we study a lot. Whether we study Dharma or whether we study worldly affairs, we almost all, from a very little time, go to school and receive a secular education. We learn how to read. We learn how to write. We learn science. We learn all sorts of things. And so from the very time that from the time that we're very little, we learn how to study. And so study is comparatively easy for us. And so for that reason, if we are able to study, actually it is extremely helpful for our practice. It's very important and it's very beneficial. Even if you can't study anything else, at least read the instructions on Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And with the instructions on Mahamudra and Dzogchen, there are the instructions on the preliminary practices, there are instructions on the actual practices, and they come from different types of instructions that come from different types of traditions. And so if you can read these and study them, it is really very beneficial for your practice. One of the things that many of the instructions on Mahamudra say is that there are 4 different types of lamas. There is the individual lama of the lineage, there is the sign lama of appearances, there is the ultimate lama of the Dharma nature, and there is the word lama of the Sugatas. And so of these 4 different types of lamas, the ultimate lama of the Dharma nature is the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind isn't something that some individuals have and some individuals don't. It's not like that. It's something that is present within all individuals. It's something that we can all realize. And so that is what we mean when we say the ultimate lama of the Dharma expanse. And so this is exactly the method for becoming a Buddha. And so when Mipham Rinpoche here is pointing out something, what is he pointing out? He's pointing out this ultimate lama of the Dharma nature, that which is present within us. If we recognize this and then meditate upon it and practice it, then we can ultimately free ourselves from the sufferings of samsara in the lower realms, and we can come to the ultimate state of liberation and omniscience. So that is the ultimate lama of the Dharma nature. The second type of lama is the sign lama of appearances. And so this is something where we can be pointed out something or we can recognize something. We see something, we recognize it, and we when we see an experience, we look at the essence of that and we can experience something. So that is what we mean by the sign lama of appearances. The third type of lama is the individual lama of the lineage. And so this is like all of the individuals from Vajravidya to Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, and so forth, all the lamas all the way down through the lineage to our own root lama. So these are they give the instructions. One lama gives them orally to another, to their student who hears them. And so then they put it into practice. Through putting the instructions into practice, they develop an experience of it. And then once they have that experience, then they can teach those instructions to other students who also can practice it, who meditate upon it, and can come to attain the ultimate results of their practice. And so in this way, it's passed down from one lama to another lama. So that's the individual lama of the lineage. The fourth type of lama is the word lama of the Sugatas. And so this is not actually the individual lamas of the lineage. Rather, these are the books and the instructions, sort of the written instructions that we can get. Whether these are the instruction manuals on Mahamudra or the instruction manuals on Dzogchen, whether they're the instructions on the preliminaries or the instructions on the actual practice, they're the things that we can take and we can look through them gradually, we can study them. We can study them on our own without having to wait for or rely on some other individual, but rather we read them on our own. We get some sort of an experience through that. So we read them, we put them into practice, and then we take some sort of an understanding out of them. We find an understanding with them in them. And so in this way, it's very helpful for us to read all sorts of books and all sorts of instruction manuals. It's really wonderful. 20 or 30 years ago, there just weren't that many instruction manuals. There weren't that many Dharma books available at all. But now there have been many translators who've translated a lot of works. They've published a lot of them. And so you can get all the instructions on the Mahamudra and on Dzogchen. You can read them. And so there are various different sorts of instructions you can get. There is the clarifying the natural state. There is the moonbeams of Mahamudra, the ocean of certainty, and so forth. There are long instructions for those who like things long and detailed. There are short instructions for those who like things short and simple. And so you can study these things and you can understand them and put them into practice. And this is really a wonderful thing to do. So study is really very helpful. Study and contemplation is very helpful. And so those students who have some experience then can take these instructions and they can teach them to new students who have not yet developed their experience. One of the things that many of the great masters and scholars of the past have said is that books are the Lama that never gets annoyed. When you have the individual Lama of the lineage, sometimes they have time, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're in a good mood, sometimes they're not. But with books, it's always the same. It can be day, it can be night, it can be early in the morning, it can be late at night. Whenever you've got time, the book has time too, and you can read. and so when you don't have time, then you can put it down. And so to study the books is really extremely helpful. And so you can study the instructions on Mahamudra and on Dzogchen. But there are also other things that you can study, other texts and other fields of knowledge, Buddhist fields of knowledge that you can study that are really wonderful to study. And if you study them, they will bring you great help. And some of them are also really quite easy to understand. They can help you really develop faith and devotion in the Dharma and real confidence in your practice. And so, for example, if we think about the Abhidharma teaches the presentation of the stages and the levels of the path very, very clearly. And so it's very beneficial to study that. Also, there are the teachings of the middle way. And if you study the teachings of the middle way, then this can really help you, help elicit a real certainty in the teachings. And so studying them, listening, reading, and contemplating them is extremely beneficial. Now, generally when we look at the books that have been translated into Tibetan, the words of the Buddha and the treatises, they were translated a very, very long time ago, and so they're in very archaic language. And often for new students especially, unless you have a teacher who can explain to you what that archaic language means, it can be very difficult to understand. But these days, with all the things that are being translated into English, they're not being translated into archaic English. It's not like they're being translated into Shakespearean verse. Rather, they're being translated into current contemporary English, and so it's easier for you all to understand. And so they're very beneficial to study. So yesterday evening, we talked about the instructions that break open the eggshell of ignorance. And so first, when we are just merely resting, we're just merely resting. At that point, it's sort of a vacant state, and a blank state. It's called what we call ignorance, or undecided, or indifference. And so, generally, with our minds, when we aren't meditating, when we haven't meditated, there's all the disturbance, all the motion of the thoughts. And so because of that motion of the thoughts, there's not a whole lot of clarity in the mind, nor is there much stability. And so when we don't have a lot of thought movement, and when the mind is just relaxing and resting, we're just resting there, then this is similar to shamatha. It's like shamatha meditation, but it's kind of a blank. It's a vacant state. There's no clarity there. There's none of the clarity that knows what it is like. And so it's like being within the eggshell of ignorance. And so this is like being in the eggshell of ignorance. And so, but when we look at the essence of the mind itself and we meditate upon that, we see the nature of the mind, see the essence of the mind and the way it is, then we see that it is naturally clear. So it's both clear, yet at the same time it is empty. It's emptiness. When you say that it's empty, that doesn't mean that it's some sort of inanimate sort of emptiness. At the same time, we can still perceive all sorts of things. There's nothing that we can identify as being the mind, and so in that way it is emptiness. But that emptiness of the mind is not just blank nothingness. It's not inanimate emptiness. At the same time as it is empty, anything can occur within it. All sorts of appearances can occur within it. And so it has this clear, knowing nature of the mind. And so when we recognize that, or when we know that, then that's like we've cracked open the eggshell and we can see clearly what is inside it. And so that is why these are called the instructions that break open the eggshell of ignorance. So today we have the instructions on cutting through the net of cutting through the web of existence. And so in these instructions, first we do tranquility, shamatha meditation. And at first when we do this, it's like we're within the eggshell of the ignorance. We do it, but then we look at the essence of that. And when we look at the essence of it, it's like there's a bit of stability. It's like there's a bit of something stable and strong there. And so that is what we look for. And so once you realize this, you realize that such a nature, spontaneously present since the beginning, is not formed through causes and conditions. So when we look at the nature of the mind, we see that there's such a nature. That is the nature of the mind, that you can call it the Dharma nature or the nature of the mind. You understand that it's spontaneously present since the beginning. And so it's just a question of whether we have recognized the mind or not. If we look at the nature of the mind, then we can realize this nature of the mind. And when we realize this, we're realizing it directly. We're not realizing it through inference. We realize it directly. And what we realize is that it's not formed through causes and conditions. It's not like something that didn't used to be there and is now there. It's not something that we've made up for new right now. It's changeless throughout the three times. So it's changeless whether we're talking about the past or the future or the present. It's not as if we had something good in the past and now we don't have it anymore. Or we didn't have something in the past and now we do have it. It's not like that. It is changeless throughout the three times. And so apart from this nature, the existence of some other thing called mind cannot be found, even as much as an atom's worth. And so there's this nature, this essence, this empty essence, and we can call it the mind, but there is nothing solid, there's nothing real, there's no thing that we can establish and say, this is the mind. There's none of that at all, not even the tiniest speck of anything. So this is, it's like there's nothing there. And because it's like there's nothing there, the essence is empty. And so here, through doing this, then we can develop a certain amount of certainty in this. So here, these are the instructions calling cutting the web of existence, or cutting the web of becoming. And so what is it, when we talk about shamatha meditation, what is shamatha meditation? What is insight meditation? What is the distinction between the two? Before, we don't really recognize it. We don't know the distinction between the two. But then here, it describes what that distinction is. And so, as it says here, although the previous vacant state is indescribable because of being unable to say anything about it, you have said anything about it. You have failed to clearly resolve it. I think actually here in the text there's a misplaced comma. It should be indescribable, no comma there. And there should be a comma after about it. It's indescribable because of being unable to say anything about it. You can't say anything about it, and so there's no way you can describe it. It's just like not knowing what it is. There's no clarity. You don't realize what's going on, and so you can't say anything about it. That's why it is indescribable. Its essence is indescribable, but that's just because you don't know anything at all. You just don't recognize what's going on. So that's why that is inexcribable. There's no certainty there. So there's no certainty there. But the essence of awareness is also indescribable, but the doubt concerning its the fact of its being indescribable has been resolved. And so when you have the essence of awareness, you also cannot describe that, but there's no doubt. It's like you are certain, saying, this is exactly what it is. This is what it is like. The essence is like. There's this clarity and this sharpness that is present before. Before, there was some sort of a doubt. You don't really know, is this really what it is? You couldn't say that. It's like you were inside the eggshell. But then when the eggshell has been opened, there's this clarity and this sharpness that is present. And so, therefore, there is a huge difference in their manner of being indescribable, similar to the difference between having eyesight and being blind. So when you are within the eggshell of ignorance, that is like being blind. And when the eggshell has been opened, that is like having eyesight. And so the difference between being within the eggshell of ignorance and having opened it is like the difference between being blind and having sight. And this is like what it says. When you do so, when you're resting in the awareness, it says, there's an awareness which is devoid of thought, free from inside and outside, and totally open like the sky. It has no experience, duality of experience or inexperience. But once you resolve that this is your own nature and feel the conviction that there is nothing besides this, you are unable to express exactly how it is. And so there's some, in essence, that you cannot describe, but you know you've resolved exactly what it is. So this distinction here, this distinction between the all-ground and the Dharmakaya is essentially included within this. And so when we have the ignorance, that's what we call the all-ground. We talk about the all-ground, that generally means when we don't have a lot of thoughts occurring. It's like the basis for all, the basis or the ground for all of our thoughts and cognitions that occur. It doesn't really fall into the direction of one thought or the other. It is not a coarse thought. The all-ground refers to just the mere clear aspect of the mind. And so when that is wrapped up within the eggshell of ignorance, that is what we call the all-ground consciousness. And then when we open that and we develop the certainty, then we experience the nature as it is and realize that nature it is. That's what we are calling the Dharmakaya. It's like the nature of the Dharmakaya. So this is the distinction between the all-ground and the Dharmakaya. It's essentially included in this. So this is the same distinction. It's included in this distinction. And so this nature is present within the all-ground. But right now, we're within that all-ground. We're stuck within the eggshell, and so we wander in samsara. And when we open that eggshell and we look at the nature of the mind, then we experience the nature of the mind. And this is what we're calling the Dharmakaya. But does this mean that we automatically attain the Dharmakaya immediately? It does not mean that. Actually, what this means is that we sort of see the basis for the Dharmakaya. We see the nature of the Dharmakaya. And then as we practice, we gradually develop that. We strengthen it. Our practice gets better and better. It gets stronger and stronger. And so in this way, there's this distinction between the two, the all-ground and the Dharmakaya. And so this is how we should know that distinction. So here we have some terms. The ordinary mind, that's ordinary mind. The second is mental non-fabrication. The third is indescribability and other terms. And so these terms, therefore, both have both a correct and an incorrect aspect. So when we say ordinary mind, then when we talk about the old masters of the Kagyu school, they say that ordinary mind is extremely important. But we have to realize that there are different types of ordinary mind. There's the ordinary type of mind that they mean, and then there is sort of that regular ordinary mind that we can have. And so we have to really understand this. We have to have real certainty in understanding the distinction. Now, actually, the commentary on this text describes three different types of ordinary mind. And so the first of the types of ordinary mind is confused ordinary mind. Confused ordinary mind means that when we have a lot of thoughts that are occurring, when we have a lot of afflictions that are occurring, that's the ordinary, regular sort of ordinary mind that we normally have. And so that is a different type. That's not the type of ordinary mind we want here. That's sort of the incorrect aspect of ordinary mind. The second type of ordinary mind that is taught here is the ordinary mind of experience and realization. So this ordinary mind means when you have some sort of a fabricated experience, a mentally fabricated experience in your meditation, and you cling to it, and so you have a fabricated experience of bliss or so forth, and you cling to that, and that's the second type of ordinary mind, the ordinary mind of experience and realization. The third type of ordinary mind is the natural ordinary mind. And that is when we look at the nature of the mind and we don't alter it or fiddle with it in any way. And so this is the correct type of, the correct aspect of ordinary mind. So it's the essence of the mind and the essence of the mind that we rest in. So in this way, we have the three types of ordinary mind. And the first two of them, the confused ordinary mind and the ordinary mind of experience and realization, are the incorrect the incorrect ordinary mind. And the last of these is the natural ordinary mind is the correct one. And so it's important for us to understand these distinctions. And then we have the text of mental non-fabrication. It's translated as mental non-fabrication here. It can also be translated as mental engagement, or not mentally engaging, or inattention, you could also say, not paying attention. And so, or incorrect attention. So when you have this inattention or not engaging mentally, it could be because you're just stuck within the eggshell of ignorance, or there's also the time when you're outside of when that eggshell of ignorance has been opened and you're not engaging with your mind. And so that is the distinction between the incorrect and the correct mental non-fabrication or mental non-engagement. And then there is indescribability, so the ineffable, indescribable, inconceivable, and so forth. And these all have these two aspects of the correct and incorrect means. And so we should, so for that reason, we should realize that there are differences in what we can understand that when we say the word. So when you comprehend the crucial point, a similar word but exalted meaning. So the similar word but the different meaning, the better meaning. So basically, you've got the same word, a superior reference, something you're referring to, and so you have to realize that you can say that when you say the word ordinary mind, you can mean something ordinary, you can mean the superior. And so here we have to recognize that difference. So when you comprehend this crucial point, that means when you really understand this thoroughly, then you attain the realization of the profound Dharma. Then that means that you are really able to develop true good experience within yourself. So that's a description of what we mean when we say the indescribable, or when we say the mental non-fabrication or the mental non-engagement. And so this explains the essences of these and what they mean. Then following this comes a description of the terms clarity and emptiness. So we often talk about the nature of the mind as being clear and being empty. And so when we say clarity, well, what is that clarity? What do we mean by clarity? When we say emptiness, then how is it that the mind is empty? This is something that we actually need to experience for ourselves. And so first it describes the aspect of clarity. When resting naturally in the state of mind essence, some people try to stay only clear and conscious. They think to themselves, oh, this has to be some sort of a clear knowing state. There has to be clarity here. They then rest in a state of mind consciousness thinking, oh, how clear this is. So they're thinking, what this means is that they've got a thought in their sixth mental consciousness that says, okay, this is clarity, that's what it is. But this clarity that is happening there, that is not the natural clarity of the mind. This is something that is fabricated by the sixth mental consciousness. And so it's so we have this thought, oh, this is clarity, but it is a fabricated clarity. This is not the sort of clarity that we actually need. So that is that is clinging to the clarity. Then some people, then there's the discussion of the empty aspect. So some people fixate, that is, they hold their minds on, they fixate on an utterly empty state, as if their mind has gone totally void. And so it's an utterly empty state, and so they think that I need to have some sort of state of nothingness and of voidness. And then as if their mind has gone totally void, as if their mind has become completely nothingness at all. And so this is also a thought of the mind consciousness. Both of these cases, the thinking this is clear or thinking this is empty, both of these cases, however, aspects of the mind consciousness, the attachment to an experience of dualistic fixation. And so both of these are thoughts, types of thoughts that come up in our sixth mental consciousness, that we're thinking, that's empty, or that's clear. And in this, there is an experience of dualistic fixation to the idea of a perceiver and perceived. And so this is really, this is actually being fixated on and attached to that sort of experience. It is not actually the true, clear, and empty nature. It's not an experience of that true and empty nature. So before we had the instructions on breaking open the eggshell of ignorance, and then once we have opened that eggshell of ignorance, then we have an experience. But when we have that experience, there are two types of experiences we could have. Could be a mentally fabricated experience of the union of clarity and emptiness, or there could be the natural experience of the union of clarity and emptiness. And so these can both occur. And so between the natural and the fabricated experiences, we need to have these are like a web of existence. Because when we're caught within this web of this clinging to these, then there's no freeing ourselves from it. We're caught within the web of perception, of perceiver and perceived and dualism. And so we need to cut that web of existence and allow ourselves to have some freedom from this. And so when this is the case, look into the nature of this rigid continuation of fixated mindfulness, the clarity and the one perceiving clarity. And so when we have this case, the case of having the mentally fabricated perception of either clarity or of empty, then we need to really distinguish between the correct and the incorrect ordinary mind. And we need to be able to understand the difference between, distinguish and understand the difference between what is fabricated and what is not fabricated. We need to truly understand that. So when doing this, we need to look into the nature of this. And so we need to look at it. We need to see the essence. We need to look at the essence of this rigid continuation. Then the clarity and the one perceiving clarity. So the clarity is when we say, oh, that is clear. That is the clarity. So that's perceiving the object. And then the one perceiving the clarity, that is the cognition or the mind that says, okay, this is the clarity. That's the idea there. And so that is describing it from the aspect of the clarity. Then from the aspect of the emptiness, you have the emptiness and the one perceiving emptiness. So the emptiness, that is like the object. That is the emptiness that is being perceived. And then you have the one perceiving the emptiness, the perceiving subject that sees, that thinks, oh, this is emptiness that is nothing at all. And so you look into the nature of this. You have to see the nature and understand that nature, how it is. And by doing so, you pull out the stake to which the mind attached to dualistic fixation is tied. And so you pull out that stake. You've no longer got any sense of, this is someone who's looking. This is the object that it's looking at. There's no longer anyone who's fixated on the emptiness. There's no longer anyone who's fixated on there's no longer any fixation on the clarity, leaving space for a wide open and natural state. And so it's like at that point there's this experience of clarity. You experience the clarity and you say, this is it. And so like you have this certainty. You've really resolved and decided what that clarity is. And so it's a luminous emptiness without center or edge. And so you recognize this state as it is. And so the very moment you resolve this natural state, the very moment you recognize it and you know it as it is, and it becomes utterly, it becomes an utterly pure openness. It can be called the face of awareness. So the face of awareness here, in the Dzogchen instructions, they distinguish between mind and awareness. And so this is what we call awareness. When we're actually experiencing the nature as it is, that is what is called awareness. The dawn of naked awareness, free from the covers of fixated experience. So the main point here is that we can have this clinging to the thought, this is clear, or we can have clinging to the thought, this is empty. And when we have that clinging, we look at its nature. And when we look at its nature, we see that it has no, that there is no nature to it. It's empty of any essence. And so when we understand that, then this is the method by which we can cut this web of existence. These are the instructions on cutting the web of existence. And when we do this, the dawn of naked awareness, free from the covers of fixated appearance. So we have this, the covers of fixated experience. This means like we have this fixated experience of thinking this is clear, or the fixation on this is empty. And so this creates some sort of an experience, a fabricated experience. And that experience is like it's like a skin or a membrane that's covering it. The thought, the fixation on this being clear, or the fixation on it being empty is like this a membrane or a skin that covers it. And so then when we cut through that, when we are free of that, then the experience of that, well, what is that? That is the dawn of naked awareness wisdom. So the awareness wisdom, the naked, it's clear and uncovered, that we experience. And so this is called the instruction on cutting through the web of existence. So perhaps that is enough for this morning's session. But if there is anyone who has some sort of a doubt or a question that they would like to ask about, please do so now.
Rinpoche, you said that this text presents Mahamudra by combining shamatha and vipassana. And that's also the case in most Dzogchen texts. And yet in many Mahamudra texts, Mahamudra shamatha is presented first, and Mahamudra vipassana is presented separately and second. And so I wonder if Rinpoche could explain the purpose and the benefit of presenting shamatha and vipassana separately, the way that most of the Mahamudra texts do.
In these instructions, it does actually teach both the shamatha and the insight meditation. I mean, it's not like it says, this is what you do to meditate upon shamatha meditation, and these are the steps you follow to meditate on insight meditation. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't teach them. And so, for example, if we look at the very beginning of the text, after the pledge to compose, there's when you rest your attention in naturalness without thinking of anything whatsoever and maintain a constant mindfulness in that state, you may experience a vacant and blank state of mind which is neutral and indifferent. And so actually, first, this is teaching methods of shamatha meditation, letting your mind be, let it rest naturally. Without thinking of anything at all. That is an instruction, a method to rest in shamatha meditation. And when you do this, what's the experience and the feeling that happens? Well, the experience is of the vacant and a blank state of mind, which is neutral and indifferent. And so that means that at this point, there's none of the intelligence of insight that is present. And then below that, at the beginning of the next paragraph, it says that although non-conceptual wakefulness has to be developed through this method of resting meditation, or you could say maybe not although, but since actually might be another way to translate it. You actually have to develop this. It's saying that it's important to use this method, and so it actually teaches it. And so it teaches that we need to do this. It teaches the shamatha first, and then it teaches the insight method before. Now, when it's teaching the shamatha meditation, it doesn't specifically go through saying you have shamatha with a reference, shamatha without a reference, with a support, without a support. But it does say that you need to maintain the constant mindfulness in that state. So you have to maintain that constant mindfulness. And so in this way, it actually is teaching us the a method of shamatha meditation.
Rinpoche, thank you for your blessings. My question is a burning question that I've had for a while, and I'm hoping that you can help me today. And perhaps you can help me formulate it. I'm not sure I have it perfectly clear. But I think the bottom of my question perhaps can be summarized as having trouble reconciling relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. When I try to meditate on the suffering of the lower realms, as I'm sure other people, it breaks my heart, and I weep, and I weep, and I weep. And I wonder why realized masters are not weeping all the time. Because I believe they're realized, and they see the pain a lot more clearly than I do, and I want to weep all the time. I realized that if I were to cry all the time, it would be paralyzing, and I wouldn't be helping anyone. So that's part of my answer to my own self. So, and I also realize that these beings that are suffering are not inherently existent, and neither is their pain. But in the meantime, they are suffering. They are being boiled alive. They are starving. They're caged. They're cut open. You know the sufferings better than I do. So perhaps Rinpoche can help me reconcile the ultimate view of the lack of inherent existence and the pain that is so all-pervasive, and then how I can move from the intellectual understanding to a practical day-to-day application. How do I act in the world combining these two, because the pain is just so utterly unmanageable sometimes.
Sentient beings experience suffering, they do. But when we develop bodhicitta, then and we practice this in our mind, sometimes, of course, we do get depressed. It is depressing. It is overwhelming sometimes to think about. And so we look at the sufferings of beings within samsara and we experience compassion, we get depressed about it. But actually, when we have the instructions on bodhicitta, then we also can develop joy and delight. And the reason that we can develop the joy and delight, the way we develop that, is that we realize that in the future we will be able to help these. We will develop the ability to be able to help all these sentient beings. We will have the opportunities to help the sentient beings. We realize, oh, if I put effort into this now, then in the future I am going to be able to liberate sentient beings. I'm going to be able to liberate this one sentient being. So you liberate that one sentient being, and then there's a second sentient being. You've liberated a second sentient being. And then you liberate a third sentient being. You can actually liberate these sentient beings. And then once, even if you can't actually liberate this sentient being, at least you can bring them onto the path that will lead them to their liberation. You can plant the seed of their liberation within this. And this is really wonderful. And so it's like when we develop the bodhicitta, and we first take the bodhisattva vow, there's this section of this that is rejoicing for the benefit of others. And so it's saying, now I go before all the gods and the demigods besides, and I invite them to rejoice. I will now treat you all as guests, so gods and demigods rejoice. And so this is saying, now I have developed bodhicitta. I'm going to take the opportunity to try to help you. I'm going to do this so you should be happy too. You should rejoice also. In the future, there's going to be someone who can protect you from your suffering, and someone who is going to stay until such time as samsara is emptied. And so in this way, we need to develop this joy and delightness. We have the power. We are going to develop the power to be able to liberate these sentient beings. And so in this way, you've developed that. And so you can also develop this real joy and delight and courage.
Okay.
Hello, Rinpoche. My question is about shamatha, about within the eggshell. I wanted to really understand the experience of resting within the all basis in shamatha, in good, strong shamatha with strong mindfulness and awareness, and the description of neutral, indifferent doesn't really resonate with me. My own experience of what I thought was strong shamatha resting within the all basis has an aspect of being pleasurable, well-being, and a sense of attachment to that, feeling like I could rest there forever and don't really want to do anything else. So I just wanted to ask about that, because the neutral and indifferent is not my experience.
This is actually a sign that you've had a lot of experience. It's not just being within the eggshell of experience, but having a lot of other good experience too.
Rinpoche, thank you. I think this is a mapping question. Our Mahamudra study group has been working with your book, Everyday Consciousness and Primordial Awareness. And my question is the distinction between the Allground and the Dharmakaya. Is that the eighth consciousness unrecognized, and the eighth consciousness the primordial awareness of the Dharmakaya? Is that the distinction between the two?
When we recognize the nature of the all-ground as it is, that's what we call wisdom, what we can call the Dharmakaya. When we don't recognize it, then that is the all-ground or ignorance. And so that's consciousness. That's the all-ground consciousness. It's not identifying the clarity. It's not identifying the emptiness. And so there is still a bit of ignorance and confusion at that point.
So the difference is consciousness. So in Dharmakaya, in full recognition and resting, consciousness dissolves?
The distinction is whether we recognize the nature as it is. When we don't recognize the nature as it is, that's consciousness. When we recognize the nature, that is wisdom. So it's the distinction of whether we recognize or don't the way it actually is. And so when we don't recognize that and we have the confusion, that is consciousness. And when we recognize it and we have experience of it, then that is the wisdom.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, first I want to thank you for coming this year. And when I heard it was going to be short, I was sad about it because I thought maybe it wouldn't be long enough. But actually, this is the best ever. So I hope you bring each time nice short teachings. I realize the patience you have to have, because year after year I say, couldn't you teach a way that if I keep doing things the same, it works? And this is just really helpful. So I want to thank you. Maybe you could come longer, teach a little while, and then just rest. So you don't have much you have to say.
Good morning, Rinpoche. Thank you so much for being here. I just have a quick question about how to apply this practice that we're all learning today and going over in our daily life, not on the cushion, but out in our life. Should we try and, with our recognition of the nature of mind, try and rest in the expansive mind as we're walking, relating with other people, doing activity, or is that fabrication? How do we train that way?
Well, it shouldn't be fabricated. If you, as you do your activities, then just remember the experience of resting in equipoise. Remember again the experience of resting in meditation. And then as you remember that, go about your activities, maintaining that mindfulness, remembering it, and then engage in your normal activities. And of course, this is difficult for beginners, but gradually, as you develop experience, it will work out well.